Mm-hmm.
Now, this was a picture of one of our relatives that Mother had, and I think there's striking resemblance.
No.
And I was thinking that maybe he was our great-grandfather, because he was very young, 19, when he went in the service.
Yeah. This is great-grandfather Luttrell, okay, and his Southern Union. Let's keep him here. Okay.
I don't want to pass this around.
I don't want to pass it around at all.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because they can see it sitting up there where it usually sits. Okay, then I need to, after all the kids are gone and you're still here, I want to write down some of this stuff.
I'm recording it all right now. I'm gonna record everything he says.
Oh, okay.
So we'll know what's going on with these antiques.
Not the first time. Okay, what we have here are some artifacts from our family. And the first one I want to talk about, ones I want to talk about, have to do with our great-great-grandfather, my great-grandfather, McBath, Andrew Montgomery McBath, but he would be your great-great-grandfather and your great-great-great-grandfather, okay, going way back. You need a little family history first, okay. Starting in, I start my story in 1845, which is 170 years ago, okay. I can't do all the greats because it will fall apart, okay. My great-great-great-grandfather, Andrew McBath, owned 3 slaves. This is in East Tennessee, in Knoxville area. This is before the Civil War, okay? And they were house slaves. They were, of the 3, there were a husband and wife pair, and then there was a single slave. And they were house slaves because in East Tennessee, the terrain is mountainous, and you wouldn't see field slaves until you went further east toward the Mississippi River, where you would see 100, depending on the size of the plantation, between 10 or 12 or 15 to thousands of slaves laboring in the fields in unspeakable labor and never-ending servitude in the cotton fields, or doing whatever needed to be done, tobacco fields, whatever. But these were house slaves, okay? And Andrew's wife constantly nagged him to free his slaves. She was an abolitionist. Abolitionists were a group of people, not only in our country or our part of the world even, but also in South America and also in Europe, who felt correctly that slavery was an abomination, okay? Great-great-grandmother, I don't have my notes, can't remember her name, it'll come to me, or maybe it won't. Lucinda. Lucinda constantly nagged Andrew to free his slaves. It was against the will of God for one person to own another person in chattel slavery. The word chattel means something that you own. So let's take my watch, for example. This is a chattel, okay? I can do with it whatever I want to do because I own it, okay? I can go there in the river and throw it in, okay? I can give it to Matthew or to you or whoever. I can break it up if I want to. It belongs to me, okay? But it occurs to me that your cat is a chattel. Your doggy is a chattel. Your horse, your cow is a chattel, something that you own, and you can dispose of it as you wish. But a human being is not a chattel, and never should be. It is against all morality, in any religion, whatever, for another human being to own another. Many religions permit it, but we're not going there, are we? Lucinda was an abolitionist. It was not permitted to own another human being, okay? So she nagged her husband to free the slaves. Well, in 1945, great-great-great-grandfather Andrew McBath was on his deathbed of some sort of illness from which he would never recover, okay? And on his deathbed, Andrew agreed to free the slaves.
Wait a minute, was that 1945?
No, honey, I was born in 1940. Okay, all right.
1845.
1845. Okay, thanks, Sue. And so she sent for for the family lawyer, who was a cousin. Now, it's important on this. This was a Saturday. Okay, and so the lawyer came around, and Andrew dictated his will, okay, and the lawyer went away to make a fair copy of the will for Andrew to sign the next morning when the lawyer came back, okay. But when the lawyer came back the next morning, it was Sunday, and the grandfather refused to sign the will. Why? Because it was a Sunday, and as a good Scotch Presbyterian, he didn't do any kind of work on a Sunday, even scrawling his name on the will. So the lawyer went away and came back the next day, Monday. But by that time, Andrew had lapsed into a coma from which he would never emerge, dying later that day. Well, now you would think that Lucinda would have inherited the slaves. No. She was merely a woman, and in those days, a woman had no right to her husband's property. Everything went to the next of kin, which were his brothers. Well, his brothers had absolutely no use for the slaves, okay? And so, but they did see, they were good businessmen, they did see chance for a profit. And so they made the arrangements to sell the slaves down the river, breaking up the couple, and because single slaves brought cheaper prices, better prices. You didn't want a husband and wife tagging along together. You only needed one male slave. Here, Andrew and Lucinda's son Russell, our great grandfather, gets into the picture. He took part of his what he got from the estate and bought the slaves from his uncles and then freed them. And they go out of our story. They went north, where they would certainly encounter racial discrimination, but at least they were free. Okay. Now we fast forward to the Civil War. Okay.
That's a good story.
Russell's Russell had several sons, but one of them was my great grandfather, Andrew Montgomery McBath. And here we see Andrew in his, I would say, early 50s, okay, as an adult. But at the time of the Civil War, this man was just a boy of 14, okay, and he was opposed to slavery. The whole family was, okay, but the Civil War was raging on, okay, and so when he was 14, he and a friend of his, also against slavery, slipped away from Knoxville and crossed the rather porous lines and into Ohio and joined the Union Army. Okay, and there's a rather droll story here. When Andrew got to the recruiting sergeant, the sergeant said, well, what's your occupation? He was only a boy of 14. He had no occupation. He lied, told him he was 15. That was the age to get into the Army. And the recruiting sergeant said, well, okay, what's the last job you had? And Andrew said, I painted a fence. And so the recruiting sergeant put down his occupation as artist. And I had right here, and I had right here his discharge paper, and it says right here, and when enrolled a artist. And I always told my students I have this as proof positive from the U.S. government that I come from an artistic family.
That's great.
I painted a fence.
You're an artist.
After the war, Andrew moved to Washington, D.C., married, and he had his children there. And some of them died, as was often the case in infancy, often the case in Victorian times, now too, but especially in Victorian times before they had all the modern advances in medicine. But when he was in the Army, however, he rose to the rank of second lieutenant. First lieutenant, And here we have framed 5 of the buttons from his army dress uniform and one of the epaulettes, okay, and that's pretty damaged, okay. And I had these framed up. Now, why don't we have the whole coat, okay? And we have here his sword, okay, and his sword knots. This is very unusual to have the original sword knots, okay. And then we have the sword here, and Aunt Lila, my great aunt, had it engraved with his name and so forth. It's on one side or the other. It's hard to see. But this was his dress sword that he wore whenever he was in uniform, okay? But the question is, we've got his sword nicely preserved, and this is really an excellent case of preservation. But what about his uniform jacket? Well, there's a story here. The story is this. It's during the Great Depression, the 1930s, okay? And his son, my grandfather, your great-grandfather, Harvey Alexander McBath, was a Presbyterian minister in East Tennessee, and it was very, very cold up in the mountains, okay? And so one winter's day, Granddaddy was off preaching to the multitudes or whatever, okay? And there was a knock on the back door, and grandmother went to the back door. In those days you could do it, okay? And there was a poor man without a coat and cold, okay? And it was snowing. He wanted to know if there was anything that he could eat. Grandmother fed him. He was very, very cold, and he was going to have to go back into the snow. And so grandmother said, you've got to have some sort of garment. And so she went, now they were not wealthy, okay? So it's not like they had closets full of clothes like we do, okay? So she went into their closet and she found the uniform, okay? And so she had nothing to do, but the man was freezing, okay? And so she very thoughtfully clipped off the epaulette and the 5 buttons and saved those, and then gave the coat to the poor freezing man. Well, when Granddad got home that afternoon, he told me, and he said, I was really angry at Kate for giving away this, family heirloom. But then on the other side, and this is typical of great-grandfather and your grandfather, he said, the poor man had the prior claim, okay? You got to keep the man warm, okay? And so he couldn't say anything to his grandmother, to his wife, although he was really irritated. So that's the story why we've got these and nothing else, but presumably the old man, the guy went away warm. My great-grandfather, Harvey Alexander McBath, fell in love with the...
Not your great-grandfather, your grandfather. Harvey Alexander.
Oh, yeah, thanks. Okay, my great-grandfather, my grandfather.
Right.
Okay, yeah. Fell in love with the daughter of a Luttrell family. The Luttrells were there in Knoxville, and they had a big house, which great-grandfather Luttrell had built after the Civil War for his bride, okay, and it was a big house because they wanted to take in boarders from the University of Tennessee and students, and they did, okay, and it was a very large house, a couple bathrooms in it, and so there, my grandfather, who was a very handsome man when he was young, fell in love with the youngest daughter of the house, 18-year-old Kate Luttrell, and the picture that we're passing around is of Kate when she was 18. And when I knew her as a very old woman, obviously, okay? And so I remember one time she told me there in Eagle Springs, where they lived, she said, Bob, when I was 18, I was the prettiest gal in Knoxville. And I said, yeah, sure, grandmother, because, she had wattles and, and dewlaps and all this sort of thing. But then I ran across this, and by George, she was an absolutely beautiful woman. Okay, so they got married. It was a love match that lasted for more than 50 years. Okay, and they celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary, and Granddaddy died a couple of years after that. But he had to drop out of the University of Tennessee where he was enrolled. That's how he met grandmother, because granddaddy was had a room in the boarding house that the Lushells ran. And so in any event, his father got sick of again cancer, and he would not survive. And so grandfather had to drop out because of the medical bills gobbled up by his dad. Had to drop out and find a job. And so he looked in the newspaper for jobs on it, and he found one that was offered by the U.S. government in the Philippine Islands, which were then a colony of the United States, courtesy of the Spanish-American War. Okay, and by extension, William Randolph Hearst. That's a whole other story. But in any event, the job was for being a court reporter with the U.S. government occupying forces in the Philippines. So he applied for it, and he got it. Now, he knew certainly where the Philippines were, okay, because we have always been interested in geography, but he had no idea what a court reporter was, okay. But anyway, he applied for it, got the job, and hopped on the ship to take him to the Philippines. And the big thought was that once he got settled in the Philippines, he would call for Kate, and they would get married over there, which they did. So Granddaddy told me that when he got to the judge to whose court he was assigned, the judge was mightily peeved that he didn't know about what a court reporter was or how to do it. But there was nothing to be done with it. He's got this court reporter standing there, court reporter Manquet is standing there, and so the judge taught him how to be a court reporter. Okay, and so that's what grandfather did. And I have somewhere in storage a couple of the typed transcripts of some of the trials that he reported for. Okay, reported on. No, for is right. Okay. And several of these were murder trials, okay? And things were a little looser in those days than they are today. And so one of the things that he got from one of the murder trials was this crease. And this crease is a very interesting crease, and it would be even more interesting and valuable if the pommel had not been broken off, because it curved around this way. This is a very beautiful crease. It has what's called a flame blade, which is even better. It's double-edged because when you stab somebody with it, it creates a lesion or cuts up here and down here. Okay, and it's beautifully worked in nickel silver along in here. This is beautiful wood here. This is also nickel silver as well. And on the pass me the scabbard, please. On the scabbard, which is made of bamboo, okay, you have these metal bands in brass, okay, and this one is slid, or maybe it's supposed to be that way. Anyway, these were made from cartridge shells and hammered into into bands, and it's very dangerous because it's come loose right in here, and so when it is hung, and I had some brass things that I just fashioned to hang it, but it has to be hung by right here, whoever inherits it, and then get just a little screw thing that'll come out and support it here. Okay, and it's also at the top coming apart as well. But creases are very common in the Philippines, in Indonesia especially, in that part of the world. Some of them that I've seen are state creases that are really bejeweled and so forth. Now when you slide that in there, make sure that your little fingers are not where it can slide out and zap you, okay?
This was the murder weapon?
Yeah, the murder weapon. Yeah, it's several of them. There was another one, much longer, with a sort of a triangular blade, and at the end of the blade, there were little holes drilled, okay? And so what the people would do is this. They would put poison in those little holes, and then they'd put the sword in a whole bunch of banana leaves and so forth, and stalks, you know. And so they went through the forest, or the jungle, I mean, and when they encountered the enemy, what they would do, they were carrying the stalks of banana over their shoulder, would simply take it and go whack, whack, chopping off your head very nicely. And if the blade didn't really do you in than the poison would. And after Granddaddy's death, Tommy Crockett inherited that. Okay, and there were some other things. There was a Malacca cane that's in this group, but and grandfather, when he was in the Philippines, used to go with the court, the police officers, to arrest people. Okay, and they arrested them for various things. Okay, prostitution and whatever things were going on illegally. And he, of course, would dress up with a coat and tie and carry that Malacca cane. He was very good looking, and I'm sure that he was quite a dapper figure. I remember him telling me the story that they were raiding a gambling den. Okay. And so the police officers told him to go around to the back entrance so that when the police rushed the front entrance, all the criminals would run out the back door and downstairs to escape, right? And so Granddad told me that he, unarmed, of course, except for his cane, was told to go around and guard the back. And so when they started coming down, he threatened them with his cane, and they stopped. Okay, and then the police came and rounded them all up and set them off to the pokey. Okay, so anyhow, and so
I thought there was some poison on the end of that cane.
maybe so, who knows? But I think it was more of a thing though of they who were Asians were under the domination of the predominantly white the United States, and so when they rushed down and here was a white man with a cane telling them to stop, that there was that sort of intercultural and also interracial thing going there. There are lots of things that we don't have to go into today, and I'm not even qualified to. So that's the story of these swords. Was there anything else?
Okay, was this his dress sword?
Yes.
Or was this his fighting sword?
This was his dress sword, right? The only sword he had, because this great grandfather never saw battle. Okay, he was an aide-de-camp to a general officer, and so he just rode along with the officer and his suite of assistants. Okay.
The same one that was the artist.
Yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
right, exactly.
This sword goes in here, right?
Yes, it does.
No, this sword already is inside here.
No, darling, this
Oh, it
sword
isn't?
is right here, right?
Oh, okay. I thought, that's why I kept saying to you that I had an extra sword. So
No,
that
you
one
don't.
goes in here. So I didn't notice that.
Okay, I wonder where the extra sword is coming from.
Oh, okay.
But I mean, you know, you can work miracles.
That's just,
Who knows what might come out of your kitchen? Hint, hint. Well, I gotta try, Brian.
Okay, well, I'm going to put this back in.
Oh.
Here, I'll do it, Mom.
And it has US on it.
Well, of course.
Does it have a USA?
No.
Criminal's like, let me see what's on this thing. Where's that inscription? I know, he's like,
I was like, this one need to be careful with the sword.
So was
Like
it
Josh,
only
like
for show?
hysterical laugh, cry over there. Like,
What?
Was that only for show, or that was in case he needed it?
Well, if in case he needed
oh,
it.
you took me my feet.
In case he needed it, he could whip it out and run somebody's throat.
do you need to go the other direction?
Oh, I know what's going on here.
Is it on backwards?
Yeah, I think it is. Was it loose when you?
Yes. Bob, you want to come? I mean, Brian, you want to come see if you can get that off?
Sure.
It fell off. I think Jimmy put it back on. It may never come off.
Oh God! You can't.
So what is it that fell? This piece
It
here?
pulls that because it's missing a screw.
I got it.
He didn't put a screw in there. Okay, good.
There's a screw in there and I also see the other hole.
Mm-hmm.
Holy smokes, man.
Oh,
Let me get a little rag.
So that Kirby sword in there was used for a murder?
This one.
That one.
This one was, yes. That was a
Whoa.
murder
So we
weapon.
got to keep the murder weapons?
Yeah. Thanks so much, Luke.
I could see where it broke. Yes, you can go.
All right, y'all
See
are
where it
finished.
broke off.
Okay, now
Thank you.
it's time for lunch
So,
for
Matt.
all the kids.
These are two
If
different
y'all want to go get in the car next table and
This was my great grandfather. This was my great grandfather. His father.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And this is all the stuff that goes with this sword. And it's really interesting. And then this too, Matthew, I think I was telling you and Brian about.
Look at this over here.
Where's the engraving?
Yeah, it's all
I
interesting.
forgot to
I like
tell
the
you
story of the
that.
But-
coat.
But this
You
is,
can see where it's broken. Look.
anyway, this is just, he kept a ledger.
Oh, that's the legend.
Yeah, don't pull that all the way out, please. Okay?
Oh no.
Yeah.
Um,
And then this was, I want to get this framed too.
Yeah.
This was,
1917.
Mira, you're gonna
Which-
get hurt.
Never
I
mind.
am waiting.
You're.
I think I have 3 more cents.
this was from here. Bob, maybe you can just tell them about this thing, about the War of the Rebellion, and show them that.
I'll tell them
Just
that.
the adults, the kids, little kids are not interested in this.
It's a 50. This is
Smooth as a baby's bottom.
It's 50.
Thank you, Brian. Now, this. This is from the early 1880s sometime. It probably has a date in it. The great-grandfather he took a government job after the war, and he was in charge of the old. When you go to the mall in Washington, there's the old post office building there on the mall. Okay, that's where he worked, and he was the CFO. Okay, the financial officer. Okay, and he was meticulous in doing money, records like this, which his great grandson McBath did not inherit at all. I can tell you that. Okay. But he kept, this is his household records for whatever year it was, and it says in there somewhere. Everything that he spent, his carfare, oranges, and so forth. But in here somewhere, there, what they paid the maid, okay, because they were a middle class family, but in Victorian times, middle class families could afford maids, okay? And everybody who was middle class had a maid, and of course the people who were rich had hot and cold running servants. But the one that really got me in this, one time in the early 1800s, he took my grandfather
I thought you said
and
Casey.
his granddaddy's brother, Uncle Edgar, to see the Wild West show that was run by Buffalo Bill Cody, okay, and they took that show all around the United States, and people like Annie Oakley and so forth did shooting, from the horses and that sort of thing. They didn't kill anything, but they, target shooting, and also they had some buffalo that they ran around with, but the buffalo were not slain or anything. Lord knows Buffalo Bill Cody had killed enough buffalo, okay. Nearly wiped out the American bison, by the way, but now, thanks to Ted Turner and others, it's come back and you can have the buffalo burger at Ted's Montana Grill in Atlanta, or anywhere for that matter. And then this thing here with his name on it was produced by he belonged to not a Masonic lodge, but a fraternal order. This is his, when he kicked the bucket. This is a thing by him and the church and so forth. He was a big churchman at the Presbyterian Church there in D.C. So these are things, and here, I don't know why I kept all this stuff from her. This is various things that I haven't looked in this in a very long time.
Here. So this could be our
Oranges and beans, 30 cents.
Mm-hmm.
It's called Josh, but it's our row, okay? Well, it's why do you have a disc?
I'm just trying to remember what it says about it.
Wait, are you on the horse still? Yeah.
Oh well.
Do
Y'all
you know who
can.
Isabella is?
Hmm?
Do you know who Isabella is?
Yes, Isabella is my great aunt Lila. Her name is Liza Lila Isabella McBath.
That was his sister?
No, that was his daughter.
His
It's
daughter.
kind of cool way to get to
She was very, extremely interesting one. She introduced me to grand opera, and I inherited a lot of her classical music records, and also from grandfather as well. So she never traveled outside the United States, but she was very well traveled in books. And she introduced me to Charlotte Holmes. After I told you the story the other day, but the two boys just reading her. The story of the Hound of the Baskervilles, okay, and that sort of thing. I really, really loved Aunt Lila. We would go and stay with her in D.C. For like 2 or 3 days each summer, and she would wedge us into her apartment on 14th Street. Then it was a nice place to stay in 14th Street. I think it's gone downhill, but I haven't been up there in a long time. Starting up 14th Street. But we would then go to the zoo, the Smithsonian, and other places, the Capitol, and they didn't take us to the White House in those days because we were too young. But in any event, it was fun times.
When did Harvey become a minister?
After they returned from the Philippines, he was a businessman for a couple of years there in Johnson City, Tennessee, and then he felt that he wanted to go into the church because they were all big Presbyterians. And so then he didn't go to